right, folks. How's everybody doing? Good? Thumbs up all around. Thumbs up from Daniel. I can't see any of the rest of you. So, there we go. Okay. Haley's in the mix. I like it. Jordan's giving me a thumbs up. All right. We got some response. Okay, cool. How are folks feeling about this? What questions do people have in terms of things to move through and review for this conditioning learning stuff?
Could we start by going over like encoding, retrieval, and storage and stuff like that?
Encoding, retrieval, and storage? Yeah. All right. So, oops, that's masking. That's not right. All right. Daniel, was there anything in particular about that lecture that has you tripped up?
Just like examples of the deficits related to each of them.
Okay. Good. So, remember that as we're sort of going through and acquiring information, right? There's a number of different things that are going on that we have to be keeping track of. And if we're studying this type of stuff, we separate things out. So, encoding, this is you sort of processing information as it's coming in, right? So you're going through and sort of processing and sort of kind of attending to the thing that's going on. And then we've got storage. This is you sort of retaining information, putting it back there into some either working memory or long-term memory. And then retrieval is going to be the process of pulling it out. Okay. And when we're thinking about these deficits, if we start to have problems at any one of these levels, we start to see problems with people remembering certain types of things. And where this is really interesting is during my internship working in VA with neuropsych unit with older adults having problems with dementia and things like that, right? If someone just comes in and says, oh, I can't remember things, that's not terribly useful or informative. But if you start sort of working through and running people through some different diagnostic tests, you can start to see or start to get an idea of where that deficit is occurring. Is it a deficit of encoding? Is it a deficit of storage? Or is it a retrieval deficit? Okay. So if I'm going through, and the example we did in class, if I'm reading you a list of items, right? Say I've got 10 items, and I say, hey, Daniel, here's a list of items. I want you to remember, I'm going to read these through, and when I'm done, I want you to tell me as many as you can remember. If I go through and I read those items and I say, okay, tell me as many as you can remember, and you have no clue, like you can't tell me anything after I just said them, that suggests an encoding deficit. That didn't even get into sort of your brain to even process anything, right? But if I say, go through, read you the questions, right? Or read you those items, and you're able to give me at least some of those, suggest that encoding has taken place. But after, let's say, 10 minutes, I say, okay, Daniel, tell me as many of those words as you can remember. And you say, I can't remember any of them, right? And I say, okay, how many of those items were fruits? How many of those are foods? How many of those items were furniture? How many of those items were modes of transportation? Back, oh, okay, I remember apple, and airplane was in there, and I think desk and lamp. Okay, that's going to be a retrieval deficit. That means the fact that you were able to pull it out when I gave you hints suggests that it was in there. You just didn't have the context to go through and pull it out. Okay, and this is probably what happens most often to you as you're going through and you're having a hard time with an exam question. Probably what it is it's a retrieval deficit, right? If it kind of looks familiar, but you can't pull it out, that's what we're looking at. Now, if we've gone through and I say, okay, read the list, you're able to give me some stuff back immediately. And then after 10 minutes, I say, okay, Daniel, tell me as many words as you can remember. Yeah, I can't remember any. And I'm like, okay, how many were foods? You're like, nothing. Furniture, modes of transportation, and you've got nothing. Then we've got a storage deficit. You encoded it, right? You were able to sort of tell me at least some of those words immediately. But after a delay, you can't bring it back. Even if I give you some hints, that suggests that wasn't gone through and stored in long-term memory. And so, from a clinical standpoint, what we can start to do is develop some hypotheses about the types of deficits that people are experiencing, and sort of leads to different diagnoses and things like that. But we get different features depending on where that disruption is going on. Does that help kind of tie that together, make a little more sense with that?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Anything else other people have other questions with some of these basic processes or aspects of this three-stage model of memory that we had talked about? Okay. What other questions do people have?
Maybe like the different types of punishment, like the positive and the negative.
Okay, cool. Krista, good question. I'm going to go through, I'm going to get high tech here. Have I busted out paint for you guys before? Yeah, right. Is high tech business. All right. When we're thinking about operant conditioning, positive and negative reinforcement, positive and negative punishment, think about this as just kind of a 2x2. So here we have reinforcement, punishment. Okay. And then we have positive and we have negative. Okay. Tell me, someone, how do I know whether or not I'm working with a positive schedule or a negative schedule? What's the main thing that I'm different that differentiates these?
Is it the behavior?
Okay, yeah. First thing I want to do is I want to identify my target behavior. And so the question is, what am I doing with my target behavior here? Okay. And so if I want to, so let's switch this over. Okay. Forget about positive, negative. If I want to increase my target behavior, by definition, what am I talking about? What type of schedule?
It would be a reinforcer, right?
It would be a reinforcer, right? If I'm increasing my if I'm increasing my target behavior, I'm by definition talking about a reinforcer. So anytime you hit a situation where the goal is to increase some target behavior, we're talking about a reinforcement schedule. And if I'm trying to decrease a target behavior, that's a punisher. Okay. Again, we don't get too many things in psychology that are kind of algorithmic and sort of follow certain rules, but with this type of thing, anytime I'm trying to increase a target behavior, and remember, a target behavior is the occurrence of something, not the non-occurrence of things, so don't get yourself turned around with this. But if I've identified my target behavior, if I'm trying to increase it, I'm talking about a reinforcement schedule. If I'm trying to decrease it, I'm talking about a punishment schedule. Okay? So, we've differentiated reinforcers, punishers. How do I determine whether it's positive or negative?
With positive, you'll add something to it. Negative, you'll take something away.
Beautiful. Absolutely perfect. And this is where people start to get turned around in their head. They think, oh, positive, that means good. Negative, that means bad. Kind of. But not always, right? Let me think about, okay, how about this? If the target behavior, say I'm a teacher in a classroom, and I've got a target behavior that is, let's say Daniel is a kid in the class. Daniel's got a lot of disruptive behavior, okay? And so I'm a teacher. I want Daniel's disruptive behavior to drop down. So every time Daniel's acting out, I start yelling at Daniel. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Sit down, blah, blah, blah. But every time I do that, Daniel's behavior just gets escalates. It just gets sort of worse and worse, okay? So what I think I'm doing is I think I'm trying to reduce that that behavior by yelling and doing something like that. So in my mind, what am I trying to achieve? I'm trying to reduce a target behavior by giving something. So I think what I'm doing is positive punishment, right? But in actual fact, if every time I do this, Daniel's target behavior increases, what's actually going on?
Positive reinforcement. reinforcement.
I've got a positive reinforcement, right? Now, yelling and screaming at people that's not a positive thing. But functionally what I've done, and this happens, is oftentimes if I'm trying to do behavior management in classrooms and things like that, probably what's going on, if I had to guess, is that what's driving Daniel's behavior is attention. Because if he's being disruptive, he's getting attention. It's not good attention, but he's getting something out of that, and that's reinforcing and that's increasing that behavior, right? And so when we're working with this in an applied setting, always need to think carefully about what we're doing and whether or not what we're doing is helpful, right? Same thing if I've got, again, a young child, sort of son or daughter, is every time I go to the checkout line and they start throwing a fit, and I buy them something to get them to shut down, right? I've short-term solved that situation, but over the long term, what did I just do? I provided a positive reinforcement for losing your mind in the line, right? Because what I've done is what the child has done. Child has me on a negative reinforcement schedule, right? If I'm the kid and the target behavior is me buying them a candy bar, what I'm doing is essentially I'm going to throw a fit until you get me a candy bar, and then I'm going to stop, right? So next time I come to the line, what's probably the first thing I'm going to do? Eventually, even before you start throwing a fit, I'm just going to get you a candy bar, right? So the kid, if we're talking about the parent, the kid has a parent on a negative reinforcement schedule, right? But if we're thinking about the parent and the child's behavior, then we've got positive reinforcement, right? I think I'm fixing the situation, but what I'm actually doing is I'm giving something to that child that assures that it's going to continue and increase, right? So we need to be thinking about what's the target behavior? Are we giving something, we taking something away? And if we sort of keep that straight, that will fall into this 4x4 pretty easily. Okay. Does this help people kind of differentiate between positive, negative reinforcement stuff? Okay. Does that help, Krista?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I have another question.
Yeah.
If I think about it, I'll tell you.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Other questions?
The prepared associates, can we go over that one too?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for operant conditioning, okay. So basically, what we're talking about is our rules of behaviorism are incredibly powerful. And sometimes they can say, oh, this isn't working, but it's usually because we have our reinforcement schedule backwards. And we can train lots and lots and lots of behaviors. But there are some things that are very difficult to condition, then there are some things that are much more easy to condition. So a prepared association is anything that is fairly easily, we're kind of biologically wired to connect, right? And so the example being taste and physical illness, right? Just biologically, we're wired to very quickly and very easily associate novel tastes with physical illness. And this actually comes up as a problematic issue within treatment of patients who have cancer. If I'm on chemo, that makes me very ill. And if I eat anything while I'm on chemo that makes me ill, even though it's the chemo that's making me ill, what's likely to happen is I associate, particularly if it's a distinctive or strong tasting food or has a distinctive taste, associating that taste with physical illness. And so then I develop an aversion and can't eat that anymore. And so sometimes we have problems with individuals who are receiving chemotherapy having a hard time with just basic eating and feeding because they've developed so many taste aversions, not because the food made them sick, but because they're sick anyway, but our bodies just make that distinction or that connection pretty quick. And again, particularly if it's something that's very strong or has a unique taste. I personally have a taste aversion to cinnamon. I had a bad case or a bad run-in with some cinnamon liquor at one time when I was too young to be drinking that stuff. And so now it's been very strong. I still don't care I'm 40 years old and I still don't care for cinnamon, right? So you've got something that's a very distinct taste paired with a violent illness, and that sort of stuff can stick pretty easily. Okay, but there's certain types of things that aren't easily paired together. Okay, so again, like taste and physical, like pain, right? So taste and shock. I can pair auditory visual cues with sort of shock and sort of aversion there pretty easily. But if I, again, remember we talked about in class, if I give you jelly beans and every time you eat a lime one, it gives you a shock, you're probably not going to develop an aversion, like sort of like you eat something that's lime flavored and all of a sudden you start shaking and sweating because you're afraid you're going to get some sort of painful shock, right? That's not a thing that ties together very well. Okay, so same thing like in certain types of organisms, right? For rats, it's easy to train rats to press levers because rats press levers pretty easily. Pigeons don't press levers with their wings all that easily. We can teach pigeon peck really easily, but there's some certain, so there's species specific things that are easy to train, some things that are counter prepared that are more difficult to train. That's just kind of what this is all getting at. Does that help clarify that, Krista?
Yeah, so are they like kind of the same thing, like the prepared and the contra prepared?
Well, they're kind of, you can think about things as kind of opposite side of the same coin, right? So some things that are easy to tie together, other things that aren't so difficult to, or that are more difficult to tie together. Beyond that, you don't have to worry about this that much. Okay. So I'm not gonna say which of the following are prepared or contra prepared things to do. You don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Other questions?
Can we go over the differences of the explicit and implicit memory?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, good question, Madison. So, Madison, what time did you get up this morning?
8:30.
8:30. Okay. And what was your first class that you had?
I didn't have any classes today.
Okay. Cool. Who was the first person you talked to today?
Lexi.
Okay. All of this is explicit memory. Okay. This is just your thoughts of and your memories of things that you did. You know, the things that we're talking about right now, facts, figures, sort of how this all fits together. All of this is part of your explicit memory. It's stuff that's stored in your brain that you can pull out and sort of manipulate, sort of go back. What's your major, Madison? Kinesiology. Okay. That in and of itself is an explicit memory because you remembered what you were majoring in. As you go through kinesiology courses, you'll have facts about kinesiology. You'll be able to pull out all this is explicit memory. Okay. But there are other types of memory that we get that are less, that aren't acquired through sort of active processing. Okay. So Madison, do you know how to ride a bike?
Yeah.
Okay. So think about when you were first learning how to ride a bike, right? It probably wasn't like you didn't go through and read the manual and say, okay, I need to shift my weight here and I need to do this and I need to go through and make sure that this is straight and sort of make sure that I'm getting enough speed before. It's too many things, right? How did you learn how to ride a bike?
Just kept doing it over and over again.
Yeah. So you just kept doing it, right? And as that was going on, what was happening is you were processing information. You were learning things, right? You were learning things that were effective and weren't effective, and then you kept doing the things that were effective, and you started to build this muscle memory. So now when you get on a bike, you just get on a bike and you start riding, right? You don't think about it. It just happens automatically. This is an example of procedural memory, okay? But it's what if I told you to forget how to ride a bike? Could you do that? No, right? Or if I told you to forget for a moment how to read, right? Anytime you see text come up, your brain is automatically going to process it. It's automatic, it's involuntary, it's hard to shut down. But it's also hard to verbalize because it's not operating through those verbal channels like speech and memory and things along those lines, okay? We also say some classical conditioning, right? That's a learning that's going on without me sort of processing, oh, this and that, the other thing is happening. It's automatic. And then we see this priming issue, right? If I start priming you with certain types of things. I can influence and sort of increase the likelihood that you're going to perceive things or respond in some sort of ways. Now, this priming effect is it's not super strong, right? We hear stuff about like, oh, subliminal priming. I'm going to sort of throw you flashes of things, or, you play the record backwards and it's giving you sort of satanic messages and stuff like that. That's not really how it works, right? But this is an advertising thing. This is a big thing in product placement, right? If you're watching a show and it's sort of Coke products, Coke products, Coke products, Coke products, Coke products, there's some familiarity there, right? You just kind of go, oh, well, I sort of recognize this, and it's sort of has subtle impacts on behavior with some of this priming stuff. So that's kind of the idea with implicit memory. It's things that aren't sort of going on, You might not even recognize or notice that there's lots of Coke products in this movie. This is one of the reasons why you don't see smoking behavior a lot in movies anymore, okay? That was kind of a big thing. It sort of normalizes it. It's sort of there, and so it does sort of impact behavior in subtle ways. But if we're talking about the world population, if I move the needle even a little bit, that's a lot of people who are smoking, and so sort of one of the factors that came into that.
Okay.
Does that help clarify that?
Yeah.
Cool, no problem. All right, other questions?
I've got another quick one.
Yeah.
Can we go over like an example of a masking procedure? I don't think we touched on that too much from the slides. But...
Did you say masking procedure?
Yeah.
Yeah. If we where to do masking? Oh, okay. So this isn't going to work because Zoom has a delay and it's not going to have as much impact. But I went through and I downloaded a PowerPoint and put it in the file with just that slide that has this demonstration on. If you download it, and so you have to download it, you can't look at it in Canvas. You have to download the file and then open it up in PowerPoint on your computer and walk through this. It'll start to make a little bit more sense. But essentially what this masking procedure is if I'm interested, Daniel, in, let's say I want to know the minimum threshold, like what's the briefest amount of time that I can flash something on the screen and have you see it and recognize it and process it, right? If I'm trying to do this research, the problem is that I've got your iconic memory that's giving you a boost up, okay? Because if I go through and I flash a word, even if it's below the threshold of perception, what it is it's burned in your iconic memory for about a half a second. And a half a second is plenty of time to go through and recognize and name something. So if I go through and we're looking between these arrows and I flash that up, could you see that? How did that come up on your end? Okay, what did you see? Pizza. Okay, so you saw pizza. Now, technically, if we didn't have delays and PowerPoint was a proper stimulus delivery product, that pizza should have been thrown up there too quickly for you to process it and read it. But probably what would happen is pizza comes up and it's burned in your iconic memory right in that space. And what you can do is, even though you didn't identify it and process it, what you did when I asked you, your brain just referenced your iconic memory and said, oh, pizza's sitting right there, okay? So instead, what I can do is I have the same trial, okay? Look between these bottom two arrows. Were you able to see that?
Yeah.
What was the word?
Was it zebra?
Yeah, it was zebra, okay? But was that an easier or more difficult thing for you to sort of tease out? More difficult, right? And so if we were doing this with a proper stimulus delivery system, right, what would happen is, even though pizza and zebra were flashed on for the same amount of time, what I did is I used a mask to disrupt your iconic memory. Because zebra was there in your iconic memory, but immediately After that goes away, this mask comes up. So in your iconic memory, zebra is not there for you to reference. It's XBHTQ. Okay, and so this is what we'll use sometimes if people are looking at automatic processing of, and I've given in office hours this example a couple different times. If I'm interested in automatic processing of like phobic stimuli, okay, so let's say you're super scared of snakes, right? And I want to know if that processing, that initial processing of your terrible fear of snakes is going on through active processing, or if there are pathways that's sort of triggering that fear reaction more automatically. And so what I might do is I might sit you in front of a screen and flash a picture of a snake that's below the threshold of perception. Now, if I don't use a mask, it's just going to be snakes are going to be burned in your iconic memory, and you're going to say, yikes, snakes, no, I saw it, right? But if we go through flash a picture and then throw a mask over the top, you're going to be aware probably that something flashed up there, but you weren't able to see it, right? And if I said, hey, Daniel, what was that? You're like, I don't know. It was too quick. I didn't see it. But if we had physiological sensors attached to you, what I might find if you're highly snake phobic is that you respond physiologically more at a higher level to pictures of snakes than you do to tables and chairs and trees and flowers and stuff like that, right? Which would suggest to us that there is some processing of that fear response that's automatic, that's quick and dirty, getting in there, even though you might not recognize what you saw. And there's some interesting studies on phobic fear that suggest that there's automatic processing going on. So even before you're aware of the thing that you're seeing, already your body's primed for fear reaction and things like that. So again, just another interesting use of masks. Anytime we're trying to present something below the threshold of perception. Does this kind of tie that together? Cool. Other questions?
Can you go through the intermittent interval thing again?
Yeah, the intermittent reinforcement stuff?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that you, Jordan?
Yep.
Okay. I think that's an excellent thing to go through and take a look at. You know why? Because it allows me to give my pull my paint back up here. Okay. Same thing. When we're thinking about shaping behavior and sort of this intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is any reinforcement schedule where we're not providing a reinforcer after every occurrence of the target behavior, right? And this is important. So intermittent reinforcement is important for establishing durable behavior. Now, sometimes we mean to establish durable behavior. Sometimes we don't mean to establish durable behavior. This is the thing going back to the kid throwing the fit in the grocery line example. Okay, so if I'm going through and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to ignore this fit throwing behavior because I don't want it to go on, and I'm just going to ignore it and it's going to extinguish. That's cool. But maybe it goes on, and I've been good. Like, it's been weeks since I've given in. But the one time I give in, I just had a bad day, and I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Here's a candy bar if you just calm down, right? What did I just do?
You reinforced it.
Yeah, I reinforced it huge because what I've done is basically that kid wore me down, right? Kid wins because what I've done is I've said, the message that I've sent is that if you persist long enough, I'll cave. I'm not going to cave all the time. And it might be a long time before I cave, but if you keep it up, eventually I'm going to cave. And what I've just done is hugely just shot that that behavior way up to the top. Okay? And so what we know is this intermittent reinforcement schedules are very, very powerful. But the way we set it up starts to impact how durable or how intense the behaviors are that we get from that. Okay? So again, the thing to remember here is we have fixed schedules and variable schedules, and we have ratio schedules and interval schedules. Okay? So again, if you go back through and think about, so we've got ratio, and interval schedules. Okay, can someone tell me what defines a ratio schedule? How do I know if I got a ratio schedule?
It's number of responses, right?
Yeah, I'm reinforcing based on number of responses. So what I've got is after a certain number of responses, now depending on the schedule, we don't know how many that is, but after a certain number of responses, I'm going to provide a reinforcer. Okay, so if I'm in a situation and the reinforcement is based on the number of responses, I'm talking about a ratio schedule. Okay, and what about an interval schedule? What are we reinforcing? What's the basis for reinforcement here? Time, right? So after a certain period of time, so long as this organism is engaged in the target behavior that it's ongoing, after a certain period of time, I'm going to go through and reinforce that. Okay, so this is our differentiates our ratio and our interval, and then we have fixed, and this we have variable. Okay, fixed just means I'm administering a reinforcer based on the same number of target behaviors every time, or after the same period of time each time. Variable just means random. Okay, so if I'm in a fixed ratio schedule, and again, we'll just talk about rat in a cage because that's a sort of kind of the easiest one to go. I'm going to say I'm going to reinforce this rat after every 5 lever pressors. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, reinforcer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, reinforcer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, reinforcer. Okay, so it's fixed. It's every 5. It's based on every 5 intervals. Now, if the rat takes the rat 4 days to go through and press it 5 times, then it's going to be 4 days before he gets it, right? That's typically not how that behavior develops, but it's based on the number of presses. Variable, I don't know. It changes from following each reinforcer. It could be a lot, it could be a little, but it's still based on the number of presses. Interval is based on time. Fixed interval, after every, say, 30 seconds. So long as the rat is sitting there kind of pushing the lever, doesn't matter how many times it pushes the lever, so long as it's there kind of doing it, it gets reinforced every 30 seconds. Variable interval just depends, right? Sometimes it might be 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 2 seconds, 3 minutes. It just varies, but as long as the animal is there, doesn't matter if it presses it 1,000 times in that 30-second interval or twice in that 30-second interval, it's still going to be sort of based on that time frame. Okay, so again, this 2x2 is a nice way to kind of section this off. But what we see is, depending on the reinforcement schedule, different types of behaviors. Ratio schedules produce very high levels of responding, and this makes sense, right? The faster I press that lever, the faster I'm going to get reinforced. It doesn't matter if it's if I'm only getting reinforced after 5 presses or 100 presses. At the end of the day, the faster I press that lever, the faster I'm going to get reinforced. So ratio schedules tend to have high levels of responding. Variable schedules tend to be more persistent to extinction. Okay, if I never know how many times I have to press this bar to get reinforced, or I never know how much time has to go on before I get reinforced, I'm going to continue that behavior on a long time, much longer than a fixed schedule, right? If I'm accustomed to being reinforced every 10 lever presses or after every 5 minutes, and I all of a sudden reinforcement stops and it's never going to happen again, after I miss a couple reinforcers on a fixed schedule, I'm probably going to stop. So we don't see behavior that's as durable on a ratio schedule, or excuse me, on a fixed schedule as a variable schedule. And so if I'm running a casino and I'm wanting high rates of behavior that persist for a long time, what type of reinforcement schedule do I want my machines to be set up on? It's going to be that variable ratio, right? Because I'm reinforcing the gambler based on the number of plays. Not on time, right? Like if he's sitting around, like if you gamble, if you go to casinos, some people just kind of hang out, right? I'm just going to hang out on a slot, and I'm going to, give it 2 or 3 plays. I'm just going to wait for the drink person to come around, and I'm just going to sit there and drink my drinks and pretend I'm playing slots. That's not helpful. That doesn't make me money, right? But if I'm going to go through and I'm going to reinforce based on the number of slot machine pulls and the number of plays, but you never know how long you have to play in order to get reinforced, this is going to result in a high rate of behavior. You're going to play because the faster you play, the faster you're going to get to that jackpot. I'm going to keep playing faster and faster, high rates of play, and it's going to persist in a long, long time. I can bump a ton of money into this and not win anything and still continue to lose money willingly because of the type of reinforcement I've received here. Okay. So other thing that we see that's kind of interesting is this fixed interval schedule. And we talked about this with cognitive learning. We get kind of this scalloped behavior. What we see is after a certain amount of time, we get a reinforcer. So again, going to the rat in the cage, if let's see the rat gets a food pellet every 30 seconds, right? So it doesn't matter actually how many times the rat presses the lever in that 30-second interval. Every 30 seconds it's going to get reinforced. But we see what looks like this anticipatory reaction. As we start to get closer and closer to that time where that rat's going to be reinforced, that behavior starts to increase. And then it gets a food pellet, and then it sort of maybe slows down for a little bit until it gets closer and closer to that 30-second mark, and then starts to increase, and then kind of tapers off, increase. This sort of distinctive scalloped pattern is characteristic of that fixed interval type of reinforcement. Okay, so people feeling comfortable with reinforcement schedules, kind of how that all ties together. So this will be important. You want to make sure you got operant conditioning down. You want to make sure you got your classical conditioning tacked down, and that you can sort of pull these out of it, different examples and things like that. Other questions? Anything? All right, folks, cool. Well, if that's it, any last takers? Going once? Going twice? Sold. Okay, cool. I got a Bills game to watch anyway. So, if anything comes up as you're going through and preparing, let me know. Shoot me an email. I'm up late sort of doing stuff with things. So let me know if you're running any problems. Make sure that you've gone through again. Answer all the questions on that comprehension check slides. That'll give you a good handle on that. Make sure that you've gone through and read modules, taken notes and stuff like that. Make sure that you're focusing on examples. But if you got that covered, you should be good to go tomorrow. Okay? So that's that. Good luck. Thanks for coming in, folks. And I'll go through and get this posted up so that you can go back and refer to it if you need to. Okay? All right. We'll see you.